They row so hard off the start line. I just didn't know what to hold on to. They're so aggressive, and they row it like imagine you took the power and the aggression from an 8, but you did it in a pair or a single. Like, they go out with no fear.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to Last Stroke Counts. We've got a fantastic guest in the house today. We've got Morgan Baynham-Williams, and we're going to get into some interesting depths of her career, as she really is an eclectic individual. Tom, would you like to give a little bit of a rundown on who our guest is today?
Yeah, special guest. The list of your achievements so long that I had to write it down. Not that my memory capacity is that great anyway, but just to go through some of the highlights. Women's boat race winner from 2016. Involved in the GB senior system since 2014. 3 under-23 World Championship medals. World University champion. Back-to-back Remnant wins in Henley Royal Regatta, 21-22. 3 8-head wins. You've done Head of the Charles, double winner there. You've coached 4 crews to medals at Senior World Cups. And obviously, I would think the highlight last year being the world champion and world record holder in the PR3 Mixed 4. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's good. Well, obviously, you're kind of been on the team for a little bit with us with Rogier, and we've raced together before plenty of times. So, yeah, an easy one to have.
We didn't say mixed A Commonwealth Games champion.
Yes. That was...
Damn!
Yeah, we rode for Wales at the Commonwealth Regatta in Glasgow in
What year was that?
2014?
Yeah.
I think it's 2014.
And every time you came out to the catch, you hit me in the face with your long arms.
Yeah, I remember like I'd take the first stroke and you were like, whoa. And then, but also I've told Pete, my memory being like, we'd never been in that 8 before. So we'd never rode in it. So the whole point was that because you had 8 athletes on each team, like 4 men and 4 women, and you split down into like 4s, pairs, doubles, singles. And then at Strathclyde, they gave us an 8, didn't they? So like literally like 2 hours before the event, we like walk down to Boathouse and just see this like random 8 that's been donated to Wales. Meanwhile, Scotland's been training in their 8 for like weeks, and they've got some lovely like smooth stuff. So we go out there. I don't know why I was in the stroke seat anyway. I don't know who put me there. It's probably like one of the only times I've actually raced in this. I'm always used to training it, and then no one actually lets me race in the stroke seat. But anyway, we got on the water, and like no one knew what was going to happen, and it literally like went off. I think you were just like, right, back stops, all 8.
And then we were like,
I looked
took
at
the
you.
first stroke, we were like,
And we looked at each other and was like, oh, yeah.
it is on.
Yeah. And then we won, which was pretty cool. And then I pulled my flag out. I remember you telling me about it. You were like, you were like, I looked round at the crowd. Like, I looked to like say hi, and I looked back, and like, I already had like a
You
flag.
played out again, the flag was on. I was like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah, that's some serious pre-planning. I had no idea that we would do. Oh, have you seen the photo finish from that as well? Like, you almost can't tell who wins. Like, it's tight. And I think we really annoyed Scotland because they definitely thought that they were going to have that one.
Stroke and a pancake.
Yeah, that was good fun. I've got, I don't think the medal's here, but that medal, I've got that medal around still.
Another cool.
Yeah. Cool. Right. So, well, what I find interesting is generally what we're going to talk about. So hopefully everyone else finds that interesting. But like, obviously, I know a little bit about where you started, but for everyone else, how did you get into rowing?
I learned to row at Ross Rowing Club.
Shout out.
In the lovely little town of Ross-on-Wye. And the only reason I took up rowing is I was playing football for a women's team or a girls' team called Ross Rockets. And we were also kind of part of this Club Fever multi-sport campaign where we just played all the sports within the town. But we just kept getting so unfit in the off-season. Yeah. So they kind of went down to the local rowing club and they were like, okay, let's strike a deal. We'll give you your first ever junior academy. We keep our footballers fit. And then I just was hooked, got the bug.
That's how it goes.
That is how it goes. And now I've been stuck in this cult ever since.
Yeah, there's no escape, is there?
No.
It's funny. Yeah, whenever I hear someone, oh yeah, I'm just going to take some time away from rowing, like, you'll be back.
You'll be like, you have no idea.
It definitely like attracts a certain, we've talked about this before, like attracts a certain kind of athlete, like that mindset, like number one, like being your own biggest competition. So you're not necessarily worried as much about what else is going on. Like a lot of time in the training on the yoga and stuff, like you're really trying to beat yourself, which I think is good. Like beating yourself is like the hardest bit of competition, right? But also just all the different ways that you can measure your progress. Like for me, to constantly be able to see myself like getting a bit better was what I really liked, as opposed to like, so my sport before rowing was rugby. It's like I could have the game of my life, but 14 other people did nothing, and we got absolutely smashed. That I'd be expected to like be like, oh, you got to be annoyed, like we lost. Like but I did my bit well. Like no one gives a shit.
You're like, I was just on the show, man.
Yeah. Or if you win, and I felt like I had a bad game, like, but no one cares. Like, oh, no, just go celebrate we won. But like in rowing, I think it makes you like you have to look inside a lot and like be very self-critical. Like there's those sorts of things that seem to drag people to rowing. But I mean, for you, what do you think was like the click? Or is there a moment when you were like, man, I want to do this, like for real now?
I just loved how, and still love how the boat feels, you know? Like when you're going along and you lose yourself in the rhythm of the boat, and you know, you're gripped up, and like that's so sick. And then, you know, it's pretty cool, like learning to read rivers and things and understand like getting the hull and the stream and different bits like that. But ultimately, it is just like the rhythm of the hull, and like I honestly think that rowing is like one of the most romantic sports that exists. Like just from how it feels, and like you look at those overhead shots and you're like, that's cool.
And you get like the misty mornings, and you see sunrises and sunsets, and you see like the best and the worst of the weather, but like being outside is always really nice.
I would definitely say that rowing in a sunset, when you're in the stroke seat and you just see like, you know, the canvas disappear along the waves, and you know, the atmosphere is just magical. You have to be in it to experience it. You can't really just get that from a description. So I would encourage anybody to try this.
I think it's a different kind of team sport as well, where you're all trying to go for the same thing. Like it's not like being 9 different parts of a team, like you're 9 parts of one thing, or if you're in an 8 or 4 or pair. And I think that's what makes it a bit different as well. And like trying to like perfectly match up what you're doing with other people. Cool.
So you've essentially transitioned from football to rowing, and what kind of age was that?
I learned to row when I was 10.
10? That is much younger than most people.
I'm now 28, believe it or not. So that's 18 years in this game. And I was rowing and doing a little bit of coxing. And then I didn't really intend to take coxing seriously. I heard there was a GB trial coming up, and no one from my home club had gone and rowed or coxed for GB. And I kind of like was just like, oh, well, I'm not big enough to be a GB junior. There's no lightweights. Junior rowing are pretty scrawny.
Not in this country, no.
So I was like, well, I'll just send some tapes in and go from there. And I remember kind of like duct taping this cassette tape recorder to my life jacket and recording on like literal tapes, and then being like, well, you can't send those in. And I was like, well, what on earth is a tape recording? So then some guy in the club, like, he had to like put the cassettes into a little converter and turn it into audio. But I sent those off, and then I literally just like off a whim was like, oh, well, I think this sounds kind of good. I was like rowing at the time, just egging my mates on, and then got invited to GB trials and was like, I'll give it a go.
I don't think there's I think maybe for some people there is, but I think for most people there's no like one point when you're like, oh, I'm going to do this forever. But it just kind of slowly goes there. And it transitions from like, I'm going to have a go at this. And then all of a sudden you're like, what? I'm not having a go anymore. Like, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of already there.
You just sort of end up like on the train, and then you're like, I was moving. And then it just keeps going. And then it's the next, and the next, and the next.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you're like, I think I want to get off. But then you kind of don't really get off. You just sort of like move down a carriage or something. But yeah, like I kind of got lucky, almost, you could say. But I think actually my experience with being a rower helped me so much in what I was doing in coxing. And like when I turned up and did the trials, I hadn't actually coxed 2K before. I'd rowed it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, I've coxed a K. I figured I'd just keep talking for another K. Like, what could go wrong?
You have like a completely different innate understanding of like what it actually takes to be a rower, and therefore you can be like more compassionate to your athletes and also kind of understand their struggles better.
Well, we had a question on the Q&A. It was asked, like, as a cox, what would make you stand out? And like one of my main point was like row, like try row. Like you don't have to do it a lot, but if you want to understand, especially if you want to understand what you're asking of someone, then it's better to know. Like the cox who just screams like 10, push for 10, like from the K all the way to finish. Like you don't really know what you're asking for. Like,
yeah, I always think like you need to know your own kind of third 500, or you need to know what it feels like when you're really in the bin, or you're swimming or drowning in lactate, you know. When you're doing your own exercise and someone's, you know, screaming at you and you're like, will you just please like be quiet, do one, then that's when you think, well, okay, well, if you were doing that in the boat and you were screaming that at somebody, then it's not going to work. So what would get you going? What would draw you out of the depths? What's going to bring you back when you're absolutely gone? And a lot of the time it's really simple stuff, you know?
I remember when we lost the final in the ladies' plate, properly remember like coming into the start of the grandstand and you being like, it's going to get really loud now. And I know this is earlier than we want to, but we need to go. Like, we need to go now. And like that, like, there was like that trust in that crew, and the point where it's like, yeah, like if Morgan says we need to go, then we need to go. Whereas like sometimes like you hear something and you're like, oh my God, like don't you like, I guess it's like a form of trust that takes time. But yeah, having that voice that can, like exactly what you said, like can pull you out of it, or like just counteract the voice that's in your head. I always struggled with that voice that's constantly, I think everyone does, telling you like you're not going to do it, there's no way it's going to happen.
I always think like you're already screaming at yourself, and like you can see this whenever you go, even like you watch an erg test and everyone in the room is screaming and shouting, and I will just quietly say something, and you know, the athletes, whoever it is at the time that I've said something to, they'll come to me after and they're like, I always hear your voice cut through the crowd. It's not about who shouts the loudest. It's about, you know, very selectively choosing what you say and how you say it. And the more you know the person, then the easier it is to choose the right one.
That's another thing we said was like be around your crew. Like don't just, we've been in systems where, you know, obviously have water sessions and land sessions, and the coxes will just turn up to 0 land sessions because like, oh, I'm not coxing here, so I don't. But like the more you can know what makes your crew tick and things like that, I think like obviously the more you can pull out of them. And that's something like a training camp is a great, we had a good training camp that year. I think that was really fun.
Was it you guys really when we'd had that, like, I think we'd been late and we as a crew, we were like, I will not be late anymore. And then have we got into town?
Might have been. It might have been. Yeah, probably.
And then we were like, oh my God, we're going to be late. So we were like sprinting like all the way through town, like running all the way back to get to the briefing just so we wouldn't be late. And then we got there and we were like, play cool.
Was that was also the year that I absolutely lost it with George Rossiter? Do you remember that?
I do remember a few things going on.
So we were in the middle of a piece and George just sat behind me. And like in the middle of a 2K piece, like he shouts at me. I always say to people, like, if you've got something to say to your crew, say it on the turn, because it doesn't matter how nice or how constructive you think you're being. When you're in a piece, the way it comes out is aggressive.
Yeah.
So George just went like, no offense, like he was trying to help us thing. He was like, get your fucking blade in. And I just like, my head was, there was a period for that camp where we were struggling. Like we were struggling to find speed. It wasn't necessarily like, it was kind of like elusive. Like we had high speed, but it was coming and going. And I think we've been working really hard. I've been struggling as well. Like the whole first half of that camp, my back was like in bits. I was really troubled. I came into it with a bit of a cold as well. Or just like coming out of the end of it. We'd literally just gone back to back. We'd done like back-to-back races at, at Met. And then we'd done seat racing. And then we got on camp. And then, yeah, he just was like, he's like, get your fucking blade. And I remember my head was like, I'm never talking to him again, ever. Like, I'm never talking to that kid ever again. And we got out, and I was like dead silent in the debrief, and like people were picking up. I knew that people were picking up on that, and I said absolutely nothing, and I just fucking walked back on my own. I guess I just needed a minute. It was a long camp as well. Like, I probably just need a minute to calm down. But like, I remember my head just being like, "Fuck that kid! Like, I'm never fucking speaking to him ever again." Like so, just like got in my head about it. And then they all went for a beer. You went for a beer that night, and I was like, "No, I'm going for a beer with you lot." And then George did come and say sorry, I think. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool, man. Like, don't worry about it." I just needed, like, I just took the evening to myself.
And then you look back at it and you're like,
oh, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But when you're in it, it's everything. Like, it's everything. And everyone's trying to push everything. You know, he's trying to get the best out of you as well. But, like, yeah, that's probably one reason why I will always go back and say, like, don't give criticism to your crew, like, in the middle of a piece. But no, that was a good camp. I enjoyed that. And that was, I think, was that the fastest 8 Leander's ever done as well? That might have been the year before. We didn't have Callum in that year, did we? Callum McBride, I think that was the year before, or 2 years before.
Yeah, maybe the year before, yeah.
What year was that? Was that 20?
Was that 15?
15 was your last ladies' plate.
Was that so that was with you, yeah. Yeah, no, I think Callum.
With 14, 15, yes.
Did we do 2? Yeah.
Because you left, and then you came back and you were like,
They were
back again for one more go.
Well, I remember, so like...
You raced in the semi, right?
Yeah, so I finished in the team in start of 2014. I got sent back to Leander. And I was like, well, I've literally done like a whole winter's training with the squad. I'm the fittest I've ever been. I may as well finish this season. And then, is that the one where we lost by a foot?
Yeah.
To Harvard?
To Cal.
To Cal. 3 foot by Cal. There's so many. I've lost by 6 feet to the Germans, a foot to Harvard, 3 foot to Cal. Fair play to Cal for that, because I remember in our race plan, we were like, they're going to have to do something they've never done to beat us. And they did.
Yeah.
They did. They literally went and did a race that they'd never, ever done. And I spoke to Steve Tuck was in it.
Tucky, yeah.
And yeah, he was just like...
They just went for it.
He's like, we went for it. And like, we knew we shouldn't have been able to hang on, but we did. So yeah, we lose that by 3 feet. And I'm like, this is the end of my rowing career. Like the third final, like the third ladies' plate final I've lost. And I was in the boathouse, and Ivor Lloyd came up to me, who is like a big
chairman, I think.
He was chairman for a long time, treasurer for a long time. Or chairman currently, was treasurer for a long time as well. And he was just like, you're not going to leave it like that, are you? Are you going to leave it like that? And I was like,
You've planted.
I was like, mate, don't
that seed.
Don't do that to me. Like, he obviously knows the athlete's mindset. And even when he said it, I was still just like, I'm done. Like, I think I'm done. And then, yeah, I don't know. It was the next year when I started coaching you guys, wasn't it?
You started coaching in 2014. So it would have been the next season.
Oh, so the next season. So I can't remember then why I came back. I think it was Chris Body.
So you can't remember why you got back. Well, you've basically been coerced by the group of juniors you were coaching to.
Wore you down.
Oh, so there's a group of juniors who were like, you can. There's no way you can go sub 620.
You did 2K, yeah.
Yeah.
I did it, and we were like,
in like shorts and a t-shirt.
hello.
Well, it was. I was like, I bloody well. Like, I'll show you. I could do sub 620, and then I did like 610 naught. And then Chris Body messaged me and was like, hey, so, like, we're kind of short on bow side this year, and everyone's heard about that 2K you just pulled, like, randomly.
It was like wildfire. You did it, and then everyone was like, did you hear about it? Did you?
Well, I didn't know that.
And then we're all like this, hang on, and like, right, okay, who's gonna, right.
But Banksy made me work to get back in that crew, which I probably, yeah, it was good that I proved myself to get back in it, but, yeah, I also remember then I messed up a 2K later on in that year. Like, I properly messed it up. I think everyone was relying on me. Like, I'm the engine room. I was the big guy. I've come back from the squad. And then I had those caffeine pouches. The caffeine, do you remember the unmarked ones?
Yeah.
So Science in Sport do like a caffeine gel, which is what, like, I don't know, it's probably like 4 cups of coffee. But the GB team were like, we need one way stronger. So they made like blank label, like triple strength or something ridiculous, like way too strong. And at that time, I'd been messing with caffeine a bit, and it'd been really helping me on my like half hour and get better scores on my half hour. And I ate like 3 of those things, and like full on just caffeine overdose. Like my eyes were going buzzing, and I pulled like a 605 or something. And I like I could feel the disappointment in the room. Like everyone was like, like, no. But I redid it like 2 days later and went under 6. It was all right.
That just shows the standard of the crew when like a 6:05 is a stinker.
The classic rower. Oh, sorry, I'll just do it again in 2 days' time.
That's the only time I've ever like probably like it's because I knew what I'd done. Like I knew it was the caffeine. I knew I'd messed it up, and I knew at that time the crew was like, I knew I needed to put something down to kind of like cement my place, because I've never really been the most technical rower in the world. So I was like, I need to bring the power at least. Yeah, some good stories from that year. Like I definitely like got to fall in love with rowing a little bit again, which was really nice, because the team is the pinnacle, and obviously if you're trying to be the best in the world at something, like it's hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard, and I think a lot of people probably don't talk about how hard that is. And to segue into the next bit, I remember seeing your post when you posted something on social media, and you were like if you're doing a job you love, like everyone expects you to be happy every day about it. It was something like that. Do you remember it?
I don't know. I don't remember.
It's something like that, and I clicked, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to message Morgan," because like I know that mindset, because I've been in that place where I'm like, "This is my dream. This is what I've worked almost my entire life towards, but I'm not happy right now."
Oh no, I do remember.
Yeah,
I do remember. Yeah, I do.
and I was like, oh, I know that feeling, and I think the problem in that environment is that because everyone around you is your friend, but is also your enemy. Like you're all vying for the same seats. So sometimes I think like admitting that you're struggling is like, it can feel like you're maybe giving someone else some like power over you. Like, because you use anything you can in your head. If I was seat racing someone and I knew that they're struggling, like I'd probably try and use that mentally. So it's a situation where like sometimes it's like more difficult to talk about that.
Yeah, you're giving power away when you don't need to, and then ultimately you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, and it's purely self-inflicted, which is why it's so important to keep a positive attitude about everything. Even if you're going through hell, you need to be thinking about the silver linings and about the positives and about the big picture.
But I also think talking about it's important, because you'll feel like you're the only person that's feeling that, and that's like not true.
Yeah, I think you don't need to be kind of growing this ethos or kind of culture where being honest about how you feel, about your headspace, about how fatigued you are, or just being honest is discouraged. Like that's not right. And yes, at the Olympic level, you are essentially, the reliance is that you as an individual, you have to be the best you can be, and you take care of yourself. That is your job you have to do. Other people do that for themselves, and that's how it all works. That's how the machine moves and functions. That does mean that when you yourself are struggling and you need some extra help, often your peers, your friends, like, they don't have the capacity to do that. And they will try in some shape or form, but
it's difficult. It gets really difficult.
I remember when you have your families like trying to help, like, oh, what? Like one thing my parents want to say, like, why didn't you just go to Jürgen and talk to him about this? And I was like, that's not how it works. Like, I can't do that. Like, yeah, it's difficult to. I heard a really good thing the other day, actually, where someone was saying like the rule of thirds. So like in your life, like if you're pushing yourself, a third of the time you should feel really happy, a third of the time you should feel kind of normal, and a third of the time you should feel uncomfortable, or not necessarily unhappy, but uncomfortable. Like if you stick to this kind of rule of thirds, I think that's like really interesting, because I think it's like you need permission to kind of feel unhappy a little bit, and like you can't get anywhere without grinding, and like no one loves their job every day. I remember we used to boat, where we boat from at Leander, is up on the bridge. So we're so the bridge where from Henley you're crossing over to go into London. So all the commuters, right, are like in their cars. So we always like boating at 7 a.m. Like I'm like my single. I remember like looking over those like rows of cars and seeing them. Like I could see them being like, oh fuck that. Like if it's like raining weather, like, oh, I'd never do that. But in my head, I'm like, I'd never do that. Like I'm never going to do that. And they're like, I'm never going to do that. Like perspective and stuff.
Yeah, but then also, so I will like sit in traffic every morning on my way to Caversham, and there's these like traffic lights in Henley, and I always look to my right, and there's this guy up there, and he's a dad, and he's got like some toast or some cereal in his mouth, and he's like making his little kids breakfast, and I'm just like, wow, like it's another world, but it's the same world.
Yeah. That's a fact. Rowers get kind of like a bad rep sometimes. Being like, oh, all you care about is rowing, all you talk about is rowing. Like, oh, we're going to have a beer, but like the subject always goes back to rowing, because like when you're in that world, like it has to be.
That's what it takes.
Yeah, if you want to get to the top, like everything, it has to consume everything. Like, I mean, I've talked to this a little bit before, but like when I finished my career, like I remember thinking like, oh, I haven't read a newspaper for 7 years. I haven't watched the news. I haven't downloaded a new song. I haven't read any books. I haven't learned anything. I haven't studied it. I had row gear, so I had like something that I was building, but like your life goes on pause and it just consumes everything.
Yeah. That's what I used to really like at Leander when I was first there. Like, they used to have the newspaper. That was great.
I never read it.
Oh my God. I always used to do that. But, you know, maybe that's just a real dorky thing to admit. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I think different people deal with it in different ways. Like sometimes I was thinking about this the other day, like committing completely to something, it takes different forms in different people. So for me, I needed to like shut everything else out. And I took quite a lot of motivation from like not going out on a Saturday night and like avoiding those parties. And I always used to love training on Christmas Day because I got that thing. I think James Cracknell was the first to say it. You know, if you train on Christmas Day, you're getting one over on your enemies. But I also know guys, I won't name them, but I know guys who for them giving everything was also being able to let loose and going out and having a mad one and having a few drinks, because that's like what allowed them to get in the mental space that they needed to be in. So I think it takes different forms.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to get more into your history. So after Ross Rowing Club,
Yeah.
where did you go next?
I went to Oxford Brookes University.
Yeah, big up Brooks.
And I went to study sports science.
Cool.
That was in 2012, September 2012. And I coxed there from the September until the January. In that time frame, went to the Australian Youth Olympic Festival with Team GB, and Brooks was down as my club. And then for me personally, I just didn't quite feel like the boat club was for me. And that was just like a very, you know, that was just my own opinion.
Was it the training, the atmosphere, or?
I think for me, I was just so young coming straight out of school and from such a small town. I think I just wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, it's a strong, like it's obviously an incredibly successful system, but they've got like, there's a way that they do it. And like, if you're into that way of doing it, it's perfect. But if you're not, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, if I'd come back there a year later, then I think it would have been the right fit for me. But at that point in time, my experience and exposure, like, it wasn't the best place for me. But I was still mates with like all my teammates on the team there and carried on studying at Brooks. But I did some coxing kind of with the Welsh team, with Ian Shaw, and basically was kind of like a rent-a-cox. Just went around to as many places as I could, getting experience in so many different boats. Carried on trialing, and that summer I went to my first N23 World Championships.
Which year was that?
That was 2013.
Where was that?
Putting Morgan on the spot here.
Yeah, it was in Austria, Linz.
Okay, yeah.
We won a silver medal in the women's 8. And then off the back of doing that, Rob Dauncey came up to me and was like, "You thought about Leander?" And I was like,
okay. Was he coaching the men out there, or?
No, he was coaching the like second 8, the men's second 8 that was going to competitions.
Yeah, that I was supposed to be in, but my back went again.
And I was like, yes, I feel about Leander, but I don't think I'm good enough. And he was like, "Okay, look, come down, come on the launch, just have a look," and like nothing more than that. So I came down, I rode the launch, and he was coaching that 8, the second men's 8, and I kind of watched him row, and I was like, "Oh, wow, like, this is sick." I was like, "Okay, so how do I get to Leander?" And he was like, "Well, just apply." And I was like, "Okay." So I applied, and then found out that summer I'd been accepted, and so start the new season, September 2013, start the 2014 season, I moved to Leander. So I carried on studying at Brooks, and then was commuting to Leander in the mornings.
Yeah, I remember.
Honestly,
remember
the
you
car breaking down, he towed me in. Okay, so I used to drive this yellow Lupo, 19 at 99, and it didn't have power steering, and it was great. I called it Hobson, like probably the best go I ever had, but it didn't work in the rain. I think it was raining.
Probably.
And then one day, I like, you drove past. I'd like conked out, you drove past. And then
I just started dating my now wife, who's living in Oxford. So I'm staying at her house. And what was funny, because I was like, I woke up late, or I was late leaving the house. I was like, oh shit, I'm late. And was like ragging it back to Henley. And then just like as I'm going past, just seeing a little yellow. And I was like, no, I didn't see you, but I was like, I'm pretty sure it was Morgan. And I was like, I better spin round. And like, as I got to the roundabout, and my phone like buzzed, like, I was like, oh, yeah, it was you. And luckily I had a rope in my car. And wait, I told you. Wow. Probably me as well, because if you hadn't, I probably would have been the latest. Like, I feel like it. So you probably saved me.
At least we got to be like, yeah, there's a reason we're late.
Yeah, no, that was funny.
Yeah, 2014 was at Leander, and I did a little bit in and out of the senior team that year, kind of coming in, helping out. Went to under-23s again. Got another silver medal. This time it was in Baresi, in the women's 8. 2015 at Leander. Did some more cocks in the senior team. First senior camp.
Was that Sierra Nevada?
No.
They don't normally take the cocks on that. There's no rowing there.
I have actually been Sierra Nevada twice.
I've been too many times.
I've been kind of coaching and as a like a physiologist assistant. So yeah, went to under-23s again that year. Got a bronze, the women's 8. And I had kind of gone through and tried to do testing for the Rio Olympics. And had really struggled with my weight. So kind of at that point in time, it was 50 kilos.
So you've been coxing, and like for our men's crew, it's a different weight, isn't it?
It was, yeah, it was 55,
yeah.
and then it's 50 kilos for women. So I was going between 55 and 50 the whole way through. And yeah, I kind of like, your body is this amazing, crazy thing. And I had essentially through not enough knowledge and understanding and how to make weight, I really got it wrong, and I had kind of put through too severe calorie restricting. I'd affected my body so negatively that actually it gained weight, and I had all sorts of kind of repercussions from that, which at that point in time, were not really well documented or spoken about or advised upon, and kind of that was that really. So I kind of left the senior program. I carried on coxing at Leander, and I'd applied to Oxford that year. So I'd gone into Oxford University to do postgraduate study. And so I was like, okay, this gives me a good time to go away from trying to be 50 kilos, go and get an Oxford degree, win the boat race, and explore what was ahead of me there, really. So I left Leander that year, went to Oxford that kind of like September time of 2015, and I chose to go and join the women's program to work with Christine Wilson, who was coaching there at the time. And I had met her in 2013. I honestly thought she was one of the most inspiring coaches that I'd come across, and I just thought what she was doing with the women there was really impressive. I'd heard she was a hard taskmaster. I don't think I quite anticipated how much of a hard taskmaster she is or was.
Specifically for you as a cox, or the crew in general? Or just the standards?
Every set? Just standards, yeah. She could see in you what you did not see in yourself. Like, she knew how good you could be in everything and anything. And when you didn't meet that, she let you know that you hadn't met it, but not in like a way that was like aggressive, in a way that she was like disappointed. And all you wanted to do was, you really just wanted to like make her proud.
Yeah.
And then also, if you couldn't see that standard for yourself, you like bummed, because then you're like, why can't I see what I'm capable of? So kind of taught me to respect myself a little bit more as well.
I think everyone who's got to the top has had to have that coach who was able to try and eke out like what they saw in you. And I think, yeah, I don't think we'll talk to anyone on this podcast who hasn't had at least one coach who's like really been that person, or like at least, like you said, if not managed to let you see it yourself, treated you that way until you did. But yeah, I think everyone's had that.
Well, I think it's because in rowing, you're forced to be so self-critical. It's easy to get bogged down with all the negatives and kind of see actually what good bits you're doing. So it's really good to have that coach. And I think, like you said, every great athlete had to have that coach that kind of discovered them in a way. So would you say that was the coach that did that for you, Morgan?
I wouldn't say she discovered me. I think I learned a lot from her, and I think that you got to remember is like I had done quite a bit of international racing at that point in time, and I'd worked with some outstanding coaches already. So Matt Beachy at Leander Club, like he has an unprecedented track record in what he's done. I was working with the Olympic coaches at Caversham, and not even just coaches that have got international or Henley Royal Regatta wins. Like the coaches at grassroots level are outstanding. And some of the biggest lessons and kind of clearest fundamentals within rowing I learned back at Ross. And my coach back home, a guy called Malcolm Popjoy, he would always say he'd be like, right boys, every stroke as long and hard as you can. But that's rowing. Like it's all about length, and it's all about driving as hard as you can.
It's simple,
incredibly simple, but you go very, very fast. So what did happen Oxford was I was able to verbalize what I could feel. I felt like I could feel a lot of things, but I couldn't get that across to people and share what I could feel so they could understand what was going on. And I had all these sensations, and it was kind of like, well, I kind of felt like people thought I was making it up. Like, how can you feel these things if you can't say? If you can't tell us about it, well, it's not real. It doesn't exist. And actually, she had this incredible way of using words to describe the sensations to feel, and teaching that, and that was really different to what I'd experienced within the UK. And I would say that the kind of style of coaching within the traditional British coaches is very different to what it is overseas. And there's a whole world of coaching and science and approach to rowing that can really be explored outside of what we do within the British system.
I can certainly attest to that, having moved over from a Polish way of rowing. But I just wanted to touch up on what you said, which is it just shows how good it is to have many different coaches and to have many eyeballs look at you and explain things differently. Because even though you were amongst the top coaches in the world, on Caversham, Leander, people who've been to the Olympics many times, it can still be useful to hear a different perspective from somebody who, for example, trains for a different type of race. Like the boat race is not a 2K straight lane race. It's a much more nuanced race. So it just shows you must never stop learning, because you just never know. Just never drop the student attitude, and always be prepared to kind of finish the day or finish the session and gain something new out of it. And I think if you do keep that attitude with you, that's going to take you much further than if you just think, oh, I'm over it now. I know it. There's nothing left to learn, and it's really good to hear it, especially coming from somebody like you.
I think I'll look back at some of the best coaches I've had. The ones that have had the greatest impact on me are the ones who are able to verbalize the same thing in many different ways. So I remember I had a coach, my first ladies plate coach, Chris Collerton. I'd probably credit him a lot with me actually getting to rowing at the level that I needed to. I think the headspace I kind of was what had been keeping me going for a long time, mentally, through just failure after failure. And we still said, I literally the first GB junior single trial I went to, I came last, actual last. I drive 5 hours up to Boston. No one else in my school's doing it. It's just me and my coach. I've had to pay for the hotel rooms for us to stay overnight. I've to pay for everything, and then I come dead last, and I come back, and somehow I don't know how I decided to keep going. But then my second year at Leander, Chris just spent a lot of time with me. I was in a pair with my pairs partner Ali Webb, and he must have got bored, man. We're doing donuts, a lot of donuts, and he's trying to explain something. He could see I didn't do it. He tried a different way. He tried a different exercise. He tried a different way. He found a different way. He explained a different way, and then boom, just be I get it now. And I think as a coach, that's one of the best things you can do is understand that different athletes respond in different ways, like you've said. And I think we can be quite stuck. Our systems may be quite stuck in doing things a certain way. And But as a coach, maybe one thing I really enjoyed, and almost it's probably something I actually learned in business. When I first moved to Leander, I got a job at the Henley Cinema. I worked at Henley Cinema for a few years, big up Regal Picture House. And after a few weeks, they made me a manager. I don't know why. But I realized, like, on shift, like, I could be working with like 9 different people. And like, you kind of got to work out the way that motivates them to get the most out of them. So I had one guy who's like saving up for a gap year. So he just wanted all the hours he could get. So for him, like, I'd be like, mate, if you can help me out, let's put a shift in now. Like, I'll get you an extra shift next week. Whereas then I had another guy who hated the job and like, didn't want to be here. So me trying to motivate him by saying, I can get you more hours, he'd be like, get lost. So for him, I'd have to be like, just do it for me, mate. Otherwise, like, I'll get it in the neck from my manager. And then there'd other people that were like, and he kind of like learned the different ways to get the best out of people. I think that was like something I learned there. Yeah, not necessarily trying to like manipulate. I'm not trying to manipulate, but I guess it is a little bit.
Kind of is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to, like, manipulation doesn't need to be this bad, horrendous thing. It's not exploitation. You have to understand and have like the emotional intelligence to be able to work within a team and any environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not even so much about manipulating. It's more, I like to call it persuasion, because it's what persuasion is manipulating somebody to do the thing that they actually want to do in a way that they will be happy with it in the end. So.
Yeah, just because that word has the negative connotations. But yeah, no, that's funny that was something that I learned there. And then, yeah, as a coach, it's something that I find rewarding to be able to like you say, get the most out of someone, or be able to motivate them, or be able to reword something in a way that they understand. And again, we've talked about this before, but I think I'm good at that because I'm a bit dumb, and I've had to like dumb down everything that gets told to me and kind of like simplify it in my own head. And then when I give that back out to other people, they seem to see it quite simple terms as well.
One of the things that I'm really interested in is, what would you say is the biggest difference between coxing and coaching? Because we spoke about how a cox is kind of like a middle position between the athlete and the coach, but you've been on all 3 sides. So I'm interested to find out what do you think the biggest differences are, or like what are some things that you need to do differently, and probably maybe also like the most surprising difference that people just wouldn't know from the outside.
I think that, coxes coach when they're in the boat, but a coach doesn't cox. And I think the cox is actually in the boat and real time feels what's going on. They are actually experiencing it, they're not just seeing it. And I think with that, you can feel the energy, you can feel the vibe, you can feel if it's going well, if it's not going well, like who's in a good place, who's not in a good place. Like all those little bits come into play. And rowers will know this when a coach is telling them to do something and they're like, yeah, it's better. And the rower's like, no, it's not. And that happens a lot, and actually a good rower can quite often kind of like figure out what they need to do, how they need to move differently to create the right change. And often coaches kind of train, they don't coach. So they prescribe the training session or the desired outcome. They don't necessarily teach the athlete or the individual how to move and manipulate their body differently in order to bring about that outcome. I think with coxing, you can genuinely feel each seat in the boat and what they're doing and when it's different, so you can help them through and kind of teach that change. But also you are like a real-time tactician. So on race day, you are calling the shots. And yes, every crew that goes out of races will have a plan, but if you're racing and you're losing and you continue to stick to the same plan, that's madness. Like, yeah, you have to do something differently, or you have to know and understand that maybe someone else has gone out too hard and they're going to blow up, but you might also be wrong. So you have to be able to read and feel and translate the whole, and deliver or give the athletes, give the rowers the information that they need that's relevant in that moment in time. And that's really difficult because you're not only coaching, you're like a weather reporter as well. You're looking at the wind, you're looking at what's going on, you're observing the race, you're like a commentator, you're all these things encapsulated into one, and then you're using your feel for, okay, what's the boat actually doing? Right, I've used all this information, this is what I can feel, this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like, we got to go. And that has to happen within a split second.
Yeah. Do you wear shoes in the boat?
No.
So Pete was big on this. He made sure that all our novice coxes, when we were coaching last year, would take their shoes off.
And I also...
It is to feel the boat better.
Yeah, of course.
I don't like to wear big gloves. So I get really bad like chilblains on my hands and feet. Like I will cox some sealskin socks. Those kind of like waterproof socks. And then glove wise, I will, I mean, if it's bitterly cold, I'll wear some thicker gloves, but it's really hard to feel the rudder and feel the hardened gloves. So a lot of the time I'm so competitive, or I get so annoyed at myself, if I can't feel it, I'll just take the gloves off and I'm like, I'll deal with the chilblains. And then for the rest of the day, I'm like, ah.
This is getting into the, like you talking about being able to feel the rudder, and probably most people who've ever coxed will be like, what are you talking about? But it gets to the point when you do something so many times, like so often, that you achieve this like new heightened sense of what's going on. And like, it's crazy. We talked about the same with rowing, but also with like rowing machines now, like my ability to just look at a rowing machine and know what's wrong with it, or brush past it and hear that it's slightly, I can hear that bolt's loose or something.
Oh, from halfway across the room, I'll be doing something and be like, oh, check that rail top, it's loose. I'm like, what? How can you possibly know that? He's like,
Yeah, just get to that.
just done thousands of these.
Yeah, like once you've done it that many times, there's like that new level. And I think that's something like when coxes say, how can I get better? And obviously the big separation I would say between novice and intermediate is responding to the boat, like you're saying, as opposed to just making calls. And we said, like, you can rotate through 2 or 3 calls and it will have a certain amount of effect if it's essentially timing your crew up. But when you get to that point to be able to respond, the next question will then be, but how do I learn that? And like, you just got it. You just got to keep doing it.
And I think you can, like, it doesn't matter what level you're at, you can methodically learn to feel the hull. So, when I was a junior, I used to listen to what the coaches were saying. And if the boat felt different, or we did have speed coaches then, but if it felt different and I thought it felt better, I remember what they said. And I remember that feeling. And then I would use that call and I would expect to get the same response. And if I didn't get the response, I would ask for more, or I'd ask them to do it differently. And it's about you've got to form the association with yourself. So you ask for a change. How does it feel?
Yeah.
Give them a word, use the word. What did I get in response to that? And then you start to form the association yourself. You form the vocabulary to be able to translate the boat to the individual.
Yeah, and you work that in a crew. Like I've probably times with you as well, but in crews in general, when you've sat down and like pin the finish, and then like, we actually need to take a second here. What does everyone think is being? What do you think is the translation of pinning the finish? Because it doesn't. There's a lot of rowing calls that don't actually have anything to do with what they mean.
Yeah.
Like to pin the finish it's not necessarily, you can't really describe it as, and it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So
But when you do it, it makes sense.
yeah, but pin it out. Like to me, I know that means like I'm absolutely like sending it all the way through. But like that's only because we've discussed it. And again, like when people are asking for advice on stuff, it's like, you can listen to Harry Brimwell coxing that 2017 plate crew, and it's an amazing cox. Or you can listen to Scott Corkwell, or you can listen to any cox. You can't just you can't just grab that. It needs to mean something to you. It needs to mean something to your crew, and that's something that you can build. That just takes time. It just takes time to build. Like there's no easy way.
Yeah, I think recordings are a really interesting one, because you can listen to a recording and see how other coxes use their voice to execute a race, different volume, different tone, different rhythms. And that's what you need to take home from it. And you might hear the different words they're using, things like that, but you have to build your own terminology.
Yeah.
But then you can use their sort of framework and their tone and their volume and, how they approach that and play around with it. I think that's the biggest thing in coxing, is you're using your voice as a tool to bring about change. And you're essentially asking a group of athletes, a group of rowers to do something, and they decide if they do it or not. Yeah, it's hard.
It's definitely hard, for sure. When I first heard coxing recordings on YouTube, I was like, do you want to share? Like, would you share your coxing recordings with anyone? Do you put it on YouTube?
I think that it's something that is now being done more. I mean, personally, I've not shared mine purely because of just still competing.
Yeah.
I
don't think I'd want to share mine.
Yeah, but I also think,
it's like sharing your 2K score. Like, no, I don't want to.
But I also think it can be done in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So I actually think what I find really funny is you can hear who's listened to what recording if you hear them cock.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can see the calls that they've copied.
And I also think just because it sounds good doesn't necessarily mean it's good.
Yeah, this is what we're saying. Like, there's certain calls that mean something to them that doesn't necessarily mean anything to anyone else.
And also, it could sound like a mixtape, and you think, "Hell yeah, I play this on the radio," and it could have been like a sack of shit race.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke said a thing about just because you know how a cox is doesn't mean you're going to be able to beat them. And I think it's the same with like a training program. You know, like we've discussed before, like if our training program, like someone got out, it's not just the words that are written down, it's how you do it. It's everything that went into the background of it.
The implementation.
Yeah. It's like if I think about Henley this year just gone, the final of the Remington racing Australia, we're down by a length within the first 500 meters. So many very well-respected coaches, rowers, athletes, former athletes from within the UK, from around the world, they came up to me after the race and they were like, yeah, we thought it was over. Yeah, we heard over the tunnel approaching the barrier, Australia lead by a length, whatnot. They all thought they thought it was done. And none of us in the boat thought, oh, that's over. It's done and dusted. And so actually, if you played my recording, the closing stage of that race, I'm pretty much going apeshit. Because you are willing to grind the gears and go through whatever it takes to bring about a performance. And then you finish that and you reflect on it and you think, how can I do this better? What can I do? But
I think but also no one has that feel in the boat. I've had races, there was a race I did under 23s. Just races where the coaches have been like, God, you left that really late. But in the boat, it was like, no, like we had it. Like if you know how you feel, like your perception of how you're doing, whether you've had a good or a bad start, or like what you've got left to come, like you can't just look at it from the outside and say that. Plus the fact that like I don't matter if I'm a length down or 2 lengths down or 3 lengths down, like it's Henley final. Like I don't care what anyone else on the bank thinks. Like why are we going for it?
Plus from the bank, no one knows how much you've got in the tank, and that is such a big part of knowing where you are in the race. You obviously know how much you've got left. You know how much you can push on as a crew. So only how deep the gauge can go.
Yeah, and you get to the point like when you're at that level with those athletes and that crew and having rode that amount of time where like I know if someone's going to beat me, they're going to have to bring like beyond world class level. Like, we know we're world class, so like if you want to beat this, like you're going to have to be even better. Like that can give you that's quite a lot of strength and power in it. But yeah, I mean, I go back to, hopefully I didn't talk about it too much, when I won the Henley in the Thames Cup. Like we were racing a Tideway Scullers crew that had been put together with a whole bunch of guys that basically got really close in finals but not won. From a bunch of different clubs in London, and they'd gone that year to win Henley, and they smashed us at Met before we got on camp. Like they really just strangled us. They went out like length, maybe like half a length of clear water, just sat there the whole race. We hadn't raced them since. They'd had a much more impressive run to the final. And like everyone in Henley was like, you're going to lose. Like Ben Lewis told me, he was like, literally like, there was only 9 people in Henley that day that didn't realise they're supposed to lose that race. And like they like on paper, they were probably a stronger crew, and like they've already beaten us that year. We probably shouldn't have won it, and probably the only reason we did is because we believed we could. And a lot of that came from just having that tight group, having a fantastic coach, Brian Armstrong, who from the very start had like made us believe that it was possible, and going out and like having like incredible nerves, but at the same time like feeling like it wasn't our destiny, but it was ours to take. Like if we wanted it, we can go and take it. And that again, we raced that race in a way that we'd never raced before. We'd do 38 off the end of the island to the barrier, and then we settled to 34. And we went back and we never settled. We did that whole final at 38, which we'd never done before. And then that comes down to like talking about having a cox and a cox who can trust the stroke man, a cox who can see, who looks down at 38 and is like, okay, like it, but it feels good, it feels okay, it feels right where we are, like the not
crossing your gut, like a lot of the time your gut knows where you're at, it knows if it's on.
So then I definitely want to ask about 2016, so the boat race. So talking about all those things that you've spoken about having to measure everything and take all those things in and make that decision. Like you said, at that time, you were an accomplished cox, you'd worked with some incredibly high athletes, so it's not like you were a novice, but like, had you spoke about that before? Was that a decision that you made on your own? Were you nervous making that decision?
We had a meeting on the Monday, so race on the Sunday. On the Monday, we had a meeting with the umpire, and he said it's going to be really rough out there. There's nothing to say you can't go in the initial zone, but it is not really done. It was done once many, many, many years ago. You just have to make sure that you cross the centre arch of the bridge, and that's pretty much all the rules that kind of exist. And on that day, Christina said, it won't be that rough. You won't need to go there. So I was like, okay, cool. And that was that. We left it. And the night before the race, she said to us, whatever the weather, whatever the conditions, they are going to be our perfect boat race conditions. And that really resonated with me. I was like, right, like, come on then, what could you throw at us? Like, whatever you throw at us, these are our conditions. But the actual race, like, from start to Hammersmith Bridge, pretty normal in terms of boat races. Coming around the turn, I was in my how I was trained. I was driving that line how I was trained, so I wasn't making a move when the commentators are like, "She's making a move, she's going." What gave the game away to me, and I knew my answers instantly, was Anastasia Chitty was sat in our 6th seat, and she was like, Morgan, Cambridge. So I turned around, and Cambridge were cutting the corner, and this doesn't get spoke about. So they cut the corner, and I'm like, oh, hello. How have they moved so fast, cutting that corner, if that's where you're not supposed to go?
Yeah.
Like, I had former previous boat race coxes coming out, driving me the launch, telling me to drive where I was.
Yeah.
I was literally sat there thinking, finally, I've got this right. And I turn around and I'm like, what the hell, man? So then I'm like, there's your answers. The wind and the waves were overpowering the stream. I knew that there and then because they shouldn't have been able to go that fast. So if I return to my station as a leading crew, I get back on track, get out of the stream, and take it from there. And so, we cut straight across, and we have one of those kind of like a spring-loaded Hudson fin. So the Hudson responds very quickly, and the rudder on the fin was built in so that you could put the rudder on, but as soon as you release it in your hands, it returns to dead straight. Mm-hmm. So I could make quick turns, nobody's business, and the crew were used to that. So one very quick turn cuts us straight back across in front of Cambridge. The overhead shot makes it look horrendously close, but actually there was more room than that. And then I knew there and then, I was like, right, well, if I don't go into the inshore zone now on the Surrey turn, but I get as close as I can hold them in the stream, in the rough water, and they're going to fill up. And I'm saying to the crew in the recording, I'm like, we just have to stay here a bit longer, just a bit longer, just a bit longer. And we were filling up with water. Like, we have pumps on board, so I'm turning them on and off because they're filling up. And our boatman had briefed me on how to use them. If you leave them running, they clog up. Well, don't leave them on then. You turn them off, you turn them on. We had different wave breaks, so ours went up and then curled over instead of being out flat. That makes a difference to how much water you take on. I was 60 kilos and our bow girl was 57. Our bows were out, their bows were in. And we just waited and waited and waited until I knew the next turn was coming up after the crossover, where you get the Middlesex turn by the bandstand. And I was like, right, I'm always going threes. I'm like, this is the plan. This is how we're going to do the plan. We're going to do the plan, ready, go. And I was just like, this is a plan. We're going to gut the inshore zone. I'm going to hit the rudder hard and you need to push. We've got to go. Ready now. And they didn't question it. They're just like, okay, like our president was sat in the 7th seat. No one asked any questions. They didn't bat an eyelid. Anastasia Chitty in the 6th seat had won 3 boat races prior, like incredibly experienced. And they just got straight on with it. So hit the rudder, off we go. Like one tap of the rudder with how it was built within that hull, straight across. And as soon as we got in the bank, I was like, this is lovely. The water pumps were working, it all kicks in, the water's coming out. And I just didn't think they were going to follow me in there. And if they did, then we're into a different story, because then they could hold me in the stream in the rough water. But they didn't. And then all I had to remember was, I need to go through the centre arch. And I can remember saying to them, being like, guys, we've got to pull back out again. It's going to get choppy. And the straight seat was this really, really like quiet athlete. She's just like, oh, for fuck's sake. But yeah, you know, actually the knowing that it was worth doing happened much, much earlier in the race. And I also think people are so worried about making mistakes, but rowing is incredibly simple. You have to cross the finish line first. If you take a moment and to actually see what's going on and try to understand the decisions before being so critical, then you get a better idea of what's happening. There's more than one way that's going to count.
I think that's awesome. It's awesome to hear that that was a move that you made based on on the information that you were taking at the time, which I think is awesome. Like it's great that it wasn't like the coach said, like, do this. Like that's actually like such a fantastic example to see of a Cox winning the race. And we spoke about it a lot. And like I'm very frustrated when athletes look down on Coxes, or when rowers look like, or when they think that they're not as important. And I've literally heard a coach in a head race, national head race situation, say to the Cox, "You can't win this, but you can fucking lose it."
Yeah.
And like, number one, that's just not the way to speak to your athletes before a race anyway. But two, it's like to belittle such an important part of the boat, or to make them feel like they have no way of winning it. It's like, did not like that then and do not like it now. But again, like it's difficult for people who are just getting into coxing, like to make those decisions can be difficult. But I will say, like, something that stands out for me from a Cox, again, it's like having conviction in what you do, because there's so many different ways to do things anyway. Sometimes, like, if you commit to it, you commit, you know, if you say you're going to do something, you have to commit to it. And I think, like, quite often with more novice Coxes, at times, like, the athlete maybe is trying to help. Like, if the Cox is trying to spin a boat, and then the athlete says, like, oh, why are you doing it that way? Like, do it this way, or whatever. And then it makes them question themselves. So, like, I think a big part of it is having conviction. And like you said, sometimes everyone's afraid of making mistakes, but you can't, there's no way to succeed without making mistakes, and you'll never learn if you never make any. So that's great. Like, it's really cool to see that was.
I find the story really, really fascinating. I mean, you only did the boat race once, right? So normally, I think if a Cox was to do that decision, surely they'll have like some more experience under the bag. But no, it's just, you know, you knew what was right, and like you said, you had that conviction, and then you went for it. What did the crew say to you afterwards, or the coach? Because the commentators on TV, they weren't quite sure about it, and then they were just giving you straight praise. I mean, I'm not sure if you remember, but I was there after.
I remember seeing the finish line. I've got a photo of me, you, Sprucey, and Lance.
Yeah. So I watched that live. That was.
We had their IDs. No, I do remember. The crew just trusted me. Like, I trusted them. They trusted me. And we won by 24 lengths. Didn't break any rules. We did everything we could to make sure that we didn't get involved in any clashes. You know, there's no need for there to be clashing within the race. A clean race, like trying to execute our best. Like, our focus was always on our optimum hull speed. Like, are we doing the best that we can do? And in those conditions, like, that was the best we could have done.
Well, those were your conditions. I really love the fact that the coach just told you to own it, because, you know, you said that resonated, and yeah, I can completely see that, you know, like, if you believe that these conditions are good for you, you're going to go out there and you're going to row as if that is the case. So then you know, if you don't let the conditions get in your head and think, oh, this is bad, this is rough, nah, this is ours.
I'm
We're going for it.
If you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're probably right. And I think it doesn't mean that you can do everything you believe, but you probably won't achieve anything that you don't believe you can do. And you'll always have that doubting voice. And you must get it as a cox. So like that's probably something I've never asked. Like as a rower, I think that doubting voice, like it must come to you as well. Like you're not good enough. This is the wrong decision or the wrong call, or
I think
you're in the zone.
I just think that when you're coaching, like you can't be afraid to make a mistake. You have to be in the moment. And Matt Smith was the Oxford president in 2003. That was like the closest
one, yeah.
ever. And he spoke to us before the race, and he said something that Ace and Ethercott said to them. He was the coach of their crew, and he coached of Great Britain, like an outstanding athlete. And he just said to them, like, your eyes wide open, Oxford, and be present, be in the moment. And I think I really just take that into everything that I do when I'm coaching or when I'm training or just like life in general. Like, be present, be on the stroke that you're on, and coming on the track to then I was like, eyes wide open, Oxford, because you could be down, but if you change something and change how you feel your whole, if you're present to what's going on in that moment, and you can then see how that plays into what's ahead of you, then you put yourself in a position to win. And it's not over until you cross the line. There's always a way to win. I fundamentally believe that.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, there's a way to turn things around, and like, I think the more you believe that anything's possible, the more anything is possible. And it sounds like
wishy-washy,
and a cliche, but actually, like, the more you think that way, the more you will find things happening. I also think for you, it demonstrates that you have not just been doing what you've told, you've been trying to understand what you're doing and understand how the boat works. And I think, like, again, like, that's something that would for me stand out. And as a coach, I try not to just tell the athletes what to do. I try and let them understand why we're doing it that way, so that they have an understanding, so that ultimately, eventually, they'll be able to coach themselves or make changes in the boat. I think you can have more short-term gains by just do exactly what I say. Like, I know what I'm doing, and you can do it sometimes. I've seen it where, like, you can force an athlete into doing something perfect by sitting next to them in the launch with the megaphone and being like, sit up, bit forward, no, don't lean. You can make them row perfectly, and they'll row perfectly for the next 20 strokes. Yeah. But you've not actually, like, explained.
Yeah, there's a difference between coaching and development for sure. Because if you want to develop your athletes into people who can, like you said, go and coach themselves and make changes inside of the race, or have that different innate sort of understanding, well, if they understand the rowing movement also from the biomechanical sort of standpoint and the technique and everything that they're going to be doing in the boat has like a completely different meaning to it. You know, every single action counts, and every single stroke counts. Every single last stroke counts too. And, you know, you can just really sort of put so much more value on what you're doing and in the now, and on actually trying to make the right choices. If you understand how that affects the boat, then you're going to be moving differently.
And I think like Head of the Trials is a prime example, and the boat race feeds into this too, of like how if you understand what you're doing in the present, that sets you up for the future. And I think, you know, Head of the Trials is like your entry to the turns will affect your exit. So you're always thinking ahead, and you think about, okay, my exit angle. Like, where do I put my boat now before I've even gone through the bridge so that I exit right? And that's the same in the boat race. You know, you're coming through Barnes Bridge and you're thinking, okay, where do I want my boat to be when I am a length through the bridge? Okay, well, how do I get my boat there? And that's all part of it. And you have to think about, where are you on the water? What's on the water in front of you? Where's the other crew? How do I put myself in the best position? You know, I think Head of the Trials is one of the best races that any coach can go and do, because it's not the traditional line of smooth turns. It's like F1, and you might be in a situation where you have to add a pause and one side holds it up, so you change the angle of your hull so that your exit angle is bang on and what you want, and as a result you go faster and you overtake someone, than jockeying yourself and being like, yeah, I think I've got my entry right, or like, no, if I had a pause I'm going to lose time, I've just got to keep going. Like, don't blindly keep going, like, think strategy. If you change the angle of your hull, you're going to cut a corner here. How do I do that? Who holds it up? Who does what? Like, there's so many ways that you can create a turn of speed, and it's not being worried to try them out, and you're going to get it wrong. Like, I have driven that the turn on Barnes Bridge both directions so many times in training for the boat race. I think I probably did it like 20 times in a row. Just shoot that turn, go back, shoot the turn, go back, shoot the turn, go back, shoot the turn. Wrong, right, only joking, wrong, right. Got it right once. Okay, that's enough for today. You know, you can't be worried about getting it wrong, and just expose yourself to everything and anything that we can get your hands on. Like, it might be someone explaining how the pumps work. It might be helping someone put the pumps in. You don't even know when you're learning.
Was that Austin?
No, that was Andy Groves. He now works for Hudson.
Okay.
But he was really impressive.
Yeah.
Tom and I talk about this a lot. We want to practice things not to the point where we get it right once. We want to practice things to the point where it's literally impossible for you to get it wrong. You want to do it so many times, it would be going out of your way to make a mistake. But going about ahead of the Charles, I've personally never done this race. Would you say it's the race that separates the novices from the pros when it comes to coxing?
No, not at all. It depends what your definition of a novice and a pro is, because
you said it's like F1.
You could have an Olympic cox turn up and cox traditionally, in a British sense, in a way that they continue to just drive smooth turns or they just keep going. But what might win the race in that situation is being confident enough and understanding that it is a race of, there's no perfect line. The perfect line is specific to the race in that moment in time. You might have to put a pause in, you might have to stop. You have to be incredibly creative. If they do the research, there's no reason why they're not going to stand up. But some of the coxing that happens in the novice cruise is significantly better than what's going on in championship mates. Like, you will see coxers come around the turn, they've got to lean out, they've got to stick their arm in, they're not going to make the turn. That's because their entry doesn't help their exit. That's top end. And then you watch the Masters racing and you will see some of the best coxing you've ever seen. Like, those Masters are insane.
Experience.
They're unreal.
There's no substitute for experience, for sure. Cool. So, having spoken a lot about races where steering is probably the biggest part of what you do, how does that compare in 6-lane racing when, of course, you're going to keep it straight, but it's probably not predominantly like the most important thing anymore? Or would you say it still is? I mean, obviously, if you don't steer correctly, nothing else matters.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
this is probably me as a rower being like, you can just steer straight, easy, right?
It honestly depends on
That's
the
a bit
crew.
mean, yeah.
Really depends on the crew, because you know, I've been in the top British Women's 8 and we're having a tough time going straight because one side's stronger than the other.
Yeah.
And you have to counter that, really.
We did that in 2015. I remember we adjusted our start because I think it had me and Sam on. I don't know what it was.
Arnold's stroke side.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. I think it was quite a big. We were turning towards bow side, so I think it was my job to like put like a massive 10 in from like 10 to 20 to stop it.
And it does happen. But you kind of figure out how to counter steer, but also there might be like a crosswind or things like that. So if there's a constant steady stream of the same condition, it's okay, you can counter it. It's more the unpredictability that's harder. But then if you read the water, you can, for the most part, you can see the gust coming, or, you know, say if it's Dorney, every time there's a bridge, you know there's going to be an opening, and so you're probably going to get a bit of wind coming through there. But I think kind of the multi-lane stuff, like, it's only 2K and that's over really quick. And so a lot of that, I think the tone of how you race is set in how you warm up. And so you really come into your own, I think, a lot of the time if you execute the warm-up well in the best way possible so that people are focused and they are rowing the boat to their optimum hull speed in the warm-up. So like UT2, there is the optimum speed that you can move the hull at UT2. There is the optimum speed at UT1, like whatever, a burst, a technical drill. If you focus on doing it to your best and doing it the correct way, then you set yourself up to race well, because the first stroke you take is defined by what you did before it. And then you put yourself in a position to either call the race plan, which is a very easy job to do. It's very easy to got to a winning race.
Yeah.
Or you know that the crew are listening to you, so you can observe, you can see where you are, you can check in, and then you can deliver the instruction and you know they'll respond. It's all about, you need to feel like they're in the palm of your hand. But whatever you say, you know they're going to go, you know they're going to do. And that tone, that confidence, that clarity, that authority, but like mutual and shared respect is set from the first rate they take.
Yeah, definitely like works both ways. It's maybe something I haven't thought about it in terms of, as an athlete, if you really trust your cox, when they say something, you go. But as a cox, if you're going to make a move and that's going to be, and that's what you need, and it's going to have the effect, then you need to know that your crew is going to respond in the way that you're going to ask them to. So like that definitely like works both ways. I mean, you speak a lot about like, we used to speak a lot about train how you race. Like a lot of people say that train how you race, train how you race. Like you don't want to set any bad habits in or anything like that. But I mean, the other thing, like going back to the, you want to train so much until you can't lose. So Mike Spracklin with the Canadian team in 2008, their mantra was like, we're going to be so good that we can win on our worst day. Like if everything goes wrong, if we forget our kit, if we have a bad breakfast, if the warm-up's rubbish, we're still good enough to win. I think you wouldn't want to be in that position, but like ultimately it's elevating that standard, getting to that point where, I guess, talking about like the habit of winning. Have you ever really talked about that?
Yeah, I think that winning is absolutely habitual. I think you need to learn to win, and some people can't do that, and that's not a positive or negative on them. Like, it just is what it is. You have to learn to be an athlete. You have to learn to be a rower. You have to learn to win. And you can do that in different ways, but you have to figure out kind of like what makes you tick. I always think about like operating with like kind of like tenacity, integrity, and confidence, and going about your approach to things, with your core values. If you bring those into what you're doing, then everything you get is going to be like raw, organic, but true. And you're going to get like the biggest responses, whatever that is.
Authenticity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think something that makes it, certainly within rowing, like more manageable but also attainable is like you have to focus on, if you do the best you can do in that moment in time, we can't do any more than that. You could race and you could lose, but you've done your best. And well, what are you sad about? Like you couldn't do any more. You could race, like I've raced one, but not done my best, and I'm livid.
Yeah. I used to get so frustrated with people who are unhappy with a PB. Like even just my crewmates, but also like when I coach, to have someone to PB and be unhappy. And I'm like, you literally cannot do better than the best you've ever done. You've just done the best you've ever done. And that for me sometimes is when like the criticalness, the self-criticalness of being at the top end oversteps the mark, when it actually robs you of being happy of the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah. So, and you almost like, it's like the better you get, the less time you allow yourself to acknowledge how good something is that you've done.
Yeah.
You're like, I won Henley. Okay, well, I've got to go training tomorrow, so put that to bed, focus on the next job.
The way I can put it in my head is you're always looking at the next step, the next step, the next step, the next step. Okay, I've won Henley, but can I win Henley twice? The next step, the next step. Like no one ever turns around. It's like, that's a fucking big set of stairs I've just come up. And the other thing that helped me a lot, and has probably helped a lot of athletes, seems to have helped a few people that I've spoke to about it, is saying, if you could go back now to the kid that first found rowing, so for me, like when I was like 14, if you could go back now and sit down with him and be like, listen, like you're not going to go to the Olympics.
Quick, don't do it.
Yeah. Like you're not gonna go to the Olympics, but like you're gonna like row for GB. You're gonna win Henley. You're gonna get some under 23 medals. You're gonna win in the senior team. Like you're gonna be a professional athlete, which was like for me as a kid, like always wanted. Like that's what I had paid my bills. Like that kid would be ecstatic. So why am I sat here now, like unhappy with what I've achieved? And I think it is no one's going to achieve anything that's great without that mentality. But you got to mix it up, and you've got to sometimes look back and see how far you came, and you've also got to enjoy the journey. And like that's something I remember that was a Sierra Nevada camp I was on when I was really struggling. I can't remember if it was the one. I went on one with I just had like injections in my back, and like I could barely move. I was in incredible pain, but the physios were like, no, you're good. Like you can keep erging. And it was just an awful camp. And like Will Sachs was said to me, he's like, oh, you got to enjoy the journey as well. And like people say it and you know it, but like in the moment it's easy to forget. And sometimes I think like you said, like ultimately, like if you can look back on your career and know you gave it everything, there's nothing else I could have done. Like me or anyone, like if you can leave happy. And I think sometimes you before you finish, you'll struggle to see that. But then after you have a bit of a chance to step away from it, you're like, I gave it everything, like everything. I'm totally happy with how I stepped away from it, like with where I got with it. Like that's all you can do is your best.
Yeah, and I think like if you're not your true authentic self, you will never look back on it and feel fulfilled. There's always that moment where, I reckon a good way to describe it is like you're going through some sort of like unhealthy breakup.
Yeah.
And you're like, like I love them, I hate them, I love them, I hate them. And that's like, you can get to that point with rowing, like at any level, like college rowing, like you're out there in the morning and you're watching sunrise and you're like, I love this. But an hour ago, you're like, I hate this. Yeah. This is awful. Why am I doing this? And as long as you remain true to your values and you're kind of the person that you want to be, then actually you're doing something that's worthwhile and truly fulfilling.
Yeah, it's ultimately, you don't want to chase, if you're not happy with what you're doing or what you're doing it, like whether you've got a world championship medal in your hand or a Olympic medal in your hand, it's not gonna probably make you happier with you with yourself. So yeah, I think like that's definitely the thing to aim for. And I also think like with anything, getting to the top end, I think the people who get there are the ones that get there because they love what they do. And like if they truly love what they're doing, they don't want to be anywhere else. And unless you have those two things in place, you're probably not going to kind of get to the top anyway. So it's important.
Yeah.
It's also about outlasting others if you want to be there at the top end. But I can
give up.
I can certainly relate to what you said about, I've just won Henley. I've got the train tomorrow. I can't say that I've won Henley, but I've certainly won certain medals where I didn't even want to look at them. At the minute I got them put on, I was like, cool, back to work now.
It can rob you.
Got another session tomorrow.
It can definitely rob you of it. I remember, I can't remember what year it would have been, but there was the GB4 won Worlds one year. I think it was when Pete and Hodge were doing the pair. So Matt Langers was in the 4, and I remember he at the finish line he celebrated, and then some of the guys were like ripping him for it, and I think his response was like, if I can't like fucking put my hand up when I've won, like what's the point of me being here?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you have to check yourself.
I will so whatever medal I win, if they put it around my neck, and it doesn't matter if I've like whatever I've done throughout the day after that, I'll wear it to bed. Because I'm like, I will not get to wear this medal again. Like, it's so weird. Like, you work so hard for something, and they give you a medal, they put it around your neck, and they're like, great, and take it off and go. Yeah. I'm like, no. And like, if I go home, I like, sometimes I'll go with my friend, and they'll go after dinner. I'm like, right, well, I'm bloody well wearing my medal. And I'm like, you shouldn't feel bad about that. Like, people get given their kit, and they don't want to wear it, because they're like, oh, God, it's not cool to wear your kit. I can't wear your kit yet. Like, you've earned your kit. Put your kit on. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if anyone's going to come at you and like, I don't know, piss on your party because you're doing it, then like, well, shame on them.
Yeah, they're not supporting. They're the haters.
I'm so bad at that. I think it's just like self-belief a little bit. But yeah, no, I don't. I'm that guy. He's like, I don't know if I should wear GB kit. Like, it's your kit, man. Like,
you've earned it.
And I would tell that to other people.
That's what I tell them.
Yeah, and then you tell it to me. But yeah, it's funny.
I wanted to ask a little bit about international racing. So what would you say to people who haven't done it? is like the most surprising thing that you found out when you first started rowing for GB and, traveling with the team to all those like amazing rowing venues? Like, what's the atmosphere like? What did you expect? And what's something that you're only going to know if you've been there?
I think, there can be a lot that goes on, but ultimately, it's just rowing. It's a different lake and a different location, and they might be Olympic champions. They might not be. Novice, experienced, masters, men, women, mixed, whatever. It's literally just rowing. You all get on this lake, you've got a stick each, and off you go, have at it, attention go, you've got to cross the finish line first. And there will be people that will row themselves into the ground at novice, at junior, at 123, senior, masters, A, B, C, D, all the way down to, I don't know, as far as it goes. Like, rowing is rowing, and that is why I love the sport, because it doesn't matter where you come from or what you've done. Like, when you line up and someone says go, you go.
Yeah.
So you can get drawn into, like, sometimes there's a new thing now when you sit on the start line and you can kind of hear the commentary. So they do a bit of a roll call and they're like, say the strokes, the name, or you can hear like boom, 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 boom. But you could either notice that and then think, oh my God, there's pressure. Or you can be like, well, the pressure's always been there. Yeah. I've just decided to notice it now. And there's like, but, I'm trying to think of like what's different, but you have where the boat stores and you have that at Royal Regatta. Like, you walk around the car park and you try and find your opposition. You're like, do you want to go in 20 minutes? Yeah, all right, cool. You go through boat check. Well, you go through boat check. Umpires. Well, there's umpires. You got to get on the landing stage. You get on the landing stage where you wet dog. Then there's a warm-up area. Well, there's a warm-up area. Well, then you follow the instructions of the umpire and get on the start line. On the start line, it's either stake boat, freestanding, right? And then you go. And then you keep going until someone says down. And then you come in. Like, it's the same.
So essentially what you're saying is that you kind of have to remain unfazed and not let the pressure get into you, because it's just another race. So would you say that this is what the habit of winning is? If you've got the winner's attitude, you said you need to learn how to win. Would you say this is a part of it? Just being unfazed, just being so focused on your crew, your race, doesn't matter what's outside of us. Like, we're isolated, we're doing just our own thing. 5 other lanes don't even exist. We're just in our bit doing the 2K. Or would you say there's other things that make the winning form?
I think, yes and no. I think that you have people that can win a seat race at club level who are the outstanding league candidates by miles. And they go and do a GB seat race and they can't win it. And they should have won it, but they can't win it. And then you get little blocks, and people will be like, oh, they're just not that good. They got lucky then, or they choked. That's all part of performance. And I really think a lot of it is like you notice the pressure at different times. But the pressure has always been there.
Yeah.
You just decide when to notice it and when not to. And understanding that and not trying to stop it, but just accepting it. Accept it for what it is. It's like your thoughts, like they're passing cars. But sometimes you can let them fly by and be worried about it. And, imagine you're trying to cross a busy road, or you see them and you notice them and you accept them for what they are. That's a little car. That's a big lorry. I'm not going to cross the road now. That would be bad. Hang on, there's a space. Lovely. Bit of quiet. Off we go. Cross the road. It's exactly the same with pressure. You think, oh, I can feel the pressure now. Right, okay. I care. That's where I can feel the pressure. It's always been there. Race. You're a racer. And then winners can race. They get out there and they flow state. Let rip. Go for it. That doesn't mean you forget the process. The rowing is a very simple sport. And the tactical side of it comes from being able to replicate or produce the process under pressure. But if you stick to small processes and not the outcome, that's really a lot easier to do.
Right. And would you say the level of pressure that you feel comes down to your preparation? So, for example, if you go into an international race knowing we have this, obviously you never know at that level, but, you're confident when you're the top dog in your heat or in your semi-final or in a repechage or in a final. How does that differ when you're not in that position, when you are in the underdog position?
I think you you need to think about it like you're always preparing to present your best self. It doesn't matter what people do. You can't influence that. You can't change that. What you can do is go out and either do your best or you won't do your best. So you prepare to deliver your best performance. Then the result is a result. That's an outcome. But if you remain process focused, other crews, their outcomes. You could acknowledge them and see where they are. You're not going to be a length down and be like, well, okay, I'm a length down. Right? You're going to do something about it. But that, you have to focus like holistically as a crew or as an individual on what you're doing, what your boat's doing. Okay, what do I do differently to create a turn of speed? Am I doing my best? Am I going the fastest I can go? Yes. Well, I can't do any more. Keep going. Hang on. Hang in there. No? Okay, well, what can I do differently? Right. Did that work? We got a bit quicker. Great.
Yeah, I think also what you said about, just following the process and not being focused on the outcomes too much, it can help to kind of develop that numbness to failing, and also as part of it, numbness to winning, because you're just so focused on the process, on doing the right things and repeating them over and over and over. Because when you win a lot, that means you've also lost a lot. We often talk about, Tom and I, how you don't learn as much from winning as you do from losing. So I guess it's important not to get bogged down of that. And I think I've just derived from what you said, when you have that winning mindset, you don't get bogged down by failure so much. You just keep going. Cool, we're in a trench. That means we need to exit. So we need to keep going, keep pushing forward. I find that really insightful.
It just becomes like, just the more you can trust yourself. So what you're talking about, pressure, is I think maybe a key bit for me was when I realized that I'm the only person that can put me under pressure. Like ultimately, it can feel like the event or there's people around me that are like putting the pressure on, but I'm the only one that says that I'm under pressure. And like, if I can say that I'm not, and I think sometimes like realizing that voice in your head, whether it's the pressure or whatever that voice is, or the voice that when you're working really hard, it's like, I'm absolutely knackered now, I need to stop. Like understanding that that's kind of like a suggestion and not necessarily like I have to stop. And that the more you can ignore that, maybe that negative voice or that feeling of pressure over time, the more times you do it, the better you get at it. The losing thing is obviously, like we said, was funny. Like basically, if you win an Olympic gold medal, you're the guy that lost the most. You've won the biggest one because you lost the most. Like anyone who gets anywhere has failed multiple times, and that's part of winning. And then the other thing you said about racing that made me laugh. I remember we were up on Sierra Nevada once, and we had a session in the pool where it was just like, you can mess about, do whatever you want. So we found like a big, like probably as big as this table, like a float, and we were like putting it out 6 feet and then take it in turns to run from the wall and like see how far we could get on it. Obviously it started like a stupid thing, but all of a sudden now it's like, well, now it's a competition, right? And I was stood there like by the back ball, like ready to go, like to get on this. And Bale Hash is there, like messing about with us as well. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. He's like, wait. He's like, Tom, is your heart fucking going now? I was like, yeah. He's like, I knew it, racer. Let's go. Like you get like with those in that mentality, like whatever you're doing, like if you're just trying to skim a pool flow a meter further than the guy that did it last, like maybe that like flows into like the winning mentality. It's like everything suddenly becomes a focus of like, I want to do my best here. And that's more rewarding as well, I think. Like when you're trying your best at whatever you do, like you get more out of it.
Even eating is a competition in the crew room when you're having your post-session meals.
Brown sugar!
It just gets ridiculous. Like, I mean, I'm like when you're walking down the street and someone's a little bit faster than you and you're like, I'm not having this. Like it starts to like infect.
So I love driving a yellow car because when I overtake people, they get pissed off and they have to re-overtake me. And I'm like, here we bloody go, boys.
Yeah, it can get into every part of your life. And in some ways that's good. I think, like you say, like ultimately it's having an understanding of your mindset and how that can help you. And like you said, like pressure is not a bad thing. Pressure is your body saying you care about this and it's a big deal. And it's pumping a bunch of different chemicals around your body. And all of these things are like designed to help you perform. Ultimately, like if you got to the start of your Olympic final and you're like, whatever, like you're probably not going to perform very well. So again, it's just understanding that these things are normal. like I probably say a lot to my athletes, like when I've coached, like when they've said, oh, I'm this, or I'm worried about this, or this, or this, like I'll say it, like I'll be like, look, in the nicest possible way, you're not special. You're not special, and what you're feeling is not special. I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that to say that, like, this is totally normal, and everyone feels this way, and everyone feels like they're not going to succeed at times. And for me, that's like so important thing to try and get across to people that I coach is to make them realize that, like, you're not the only one that's feeling this way. That's powerful, I think. And that, as a Cox, is probably an incredibly important part of what you do for the crew.
Yeah, I think, like, ultimately it's going to be all right. Like, we're just going out for a ride.
Yeah, definitely. It's the fun thing about rowing is you get to go to war, but everyone always comes home. You push yourself to your physical limit, but pretty much we're always going to be fine. And I think that's, for me, sometimes I can be impressed by sports where there's a danger element to it. Something like road racing, motorcycle racing, where pushing your limit requires you to have your life hang in the balance, and like we never have that. So in some respects, it's like it's easier. Like you can sit on that 2K and you can flog yourself to the point you think you're going to die, but you'll be fine in half an hour. You'll get up again. So there's all different levels. Like different sport comes in like completely different levels.
One thing I find really interesting about rowing is that your heart rate charts are just off any scale. It was normal to see kind of when you were racing or doing a 2K, like numbers above 200 and potentially sometimes even 210. But one thing I've always wondered about is when you said during your race, you need to be managing the crew, you need to see what's going on around you, you need to see your opponents, and there's that adrenaline and obviously the pressure of having to perform. And you're in a really loud, fast-paced environment. You're moving at quite a speed. There's like a ton moving across the water. Have you ever raced with a heart rate meter?
Oh, my heart rate goes really high. There's actually a study that was done by a Brooks student that put heart rate straps on Coxes at Henley, and my heart rate was like 180.
That's high.
And I'm like sitting on the start line at like 150, 160. But I will finish a race and I've like sweated through everything. Like,
as you do when we do the breathing exercise, are you doing the breathing exercise?
Yeah, that's why I do it.
Yeah?
So I do this thing and I sit at the start line, okay, and I'm like, okay guys, so I like talk fairly quietly and I'm like, okay, so like Evan, bring it in, like you're gonna breathe with me, so I'm gonna breathe in and you're gonna breathe out.
And then you just watch the heart rate go up.
And everyone's like, damn, that she's good. And I'm like calming myself.
Yeah. This is
because I have to have somewhere to go. When they say go, because I'm sitting there, I'm like, if they were like, right, change of plan, everyone out, it's a brawl. I'd be like, okay, let's do it, let's go. Like, whatever. Like, if we're racing, and whatever the task is, if they tell me what the job is, I'm going to go and I'm going to do the job. My heart is pounding, and if I don't calm myself down, then I'm not going to do my best job. But yeah, and that really helps. Like, it sounds so simple, but breathe.
Yeah, so we got told we had a meeting with a sports psychologist, a physiologist, I guess, and he sort of spoke about how different mindsets have physical attributes. So you'll never see someone who like if you see someone panicky, they'll be like short and shallow breathing, and like if they're really relaxed, they're probably not going to be like that. If someone's happy, they're not going to be tense in their face. If they're angry, they're like physical ways, and like the way you do breathing as well. So like what we got to as part of that breathing exercise is about like change how you're physically behaving, and then your mental state will kind of change to it. Did you ever do like the lion mind?
Lion mind, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one.
You don't go after the plastic chew toy. You go for the real thing.
That helped me a lot. That definitely helped me a lot. The monkey in the cage as well, which I can't remember the name of the psychologist, but it's working with
the chin paradox.
Yeah, the chin paradox.
So I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Would you mind just telling us?
It's just monkey business.
You did.
It's like okay, so like the lion mind is I'm trying to remember all of it, but what I remember of it is a lion, a real lion in the wild. If you threw them a plastic chew toy, a plastic steak, they're not going to go for it. They know what it is, and they're calm and they are themselves. But if there's like a stake there, if it's got to go and it's got to find its food, then it's going to switch it on. It's going to go for it and knows which ones to go for, which battles to fight, which ones to tune into, and which ones to leave. And when you put hands on the boat, you're in lion mind because you're focusing on yourself, your crew. You're not buying into any of the heckling that another boat's doing. Crews like to sit on the start line and like bang their chest, slap their legs. It sometimes even like heckle you from the other boat, and you're in your crew. You're focusing on what you're focusing on. You're focusing on the first process, the first task you have to complete, and only the first stroke.
Yeah, it's like not trying to ignore a lot of the things that we're talking about. It's not ignoring pressure. It's about allowing it, accepting it as there, and then taking it on. So the difference between like lion mind and dog mind is like, with a dog, you've got that rubber chew toy. Like you chuck it, the dog's going to go and get it and bring it back. And every time you chuck it, the dog's going to run after it. But the lion's like doesn't give a crap. Like he's not interested in it. So it's kind of like, we use it like rowing down to the start line. You feel that wave of pressure, and then going like, okay, it's all right. Like that's normal. Or you go past the crew, or like you say, they heckle you or something. That's okay. I'll bring that in, and I'll just let that go out again. And like I'm not going to be distracted by it. There's obviously a bunch of different ways.
There was
to do it.
the monkey thing as well.
The chimp paradox.
So the chimp paradox, I'm not 100% on this. I remember Chris Hoy talking about it when he went out to do his 1K final in, was it Beijing? Would it be in Beijing? I think so. And they race in the final in reverse order from qualifying. So he's qualified fastest, so he's going last. And basically, with 3 more before him, the cyclist comes out and beats the world and Olympic record, and obviously the fastest he's ever been. Goes faster than him have ever been. The next athlete comes out and beats it again, and the next athlete comes out and beats it again. So 3 people in a row have just beaten the world Olympic record and have gone faster than he's ever gone in his life. And the explanation was that basically in the same sort of thing, that if you feel like, or if you imagine in your head that there's a little monkey in a cage, and the more mad all these thoughts of like, I'm not good enough, or how the hell am I going to go and perform like this, is if you like imagine this monkey kind of going crazy in your head. So if you think about, he's running around, he's ripping the curtains down, he's like absolutely losing it, like being a bit out of control, and just kind of literally mentally think about putting the monkey back in his little box. So like same thing, it's about accepting and allowing these thoughts to come in, but then also kind of doing something with them. So like you just kind of mentally put that, and then for him, he said, for him that was really what allowed him to just put all that thought away, all that negative stuff away, go out, do his race. Obviously, new Olympic world record, Olympic champion.
Right. So it's not necessarily about ignoring all of these things and factors. It's about allowing them in, processing them, understanding which battles you want to choose, what it's important to you, and that's how you get it.
That's what we said before about accepting that, like, it's not, none of these feelings are special. Like it happens for everyone. It's normal. You should be nervous. Like use it to help you.
So yeah, let's do some questions.
Cool. I said that we would ask Morgan a question from the Q&A last time, which was, as a Cox, how would you suggest a Cox could stand out from the squad or the crew? Like, how do you stand out as a Cox? In selection period, yeah, in like a selection process.
I think you don't need to try to stand out. I think you need to be focusing on the day-to-day at doing the best that you can do and developing yourself. And that comes from, all the things we've spoken about of like, you just need to be a student of the sport, immerse yourself in it, get yourself some water time, get out coxing as much as you can, go on the launch, shadow the coaches, understand rowing, try and translate the boat as best as you can, like continue to develop and do those things. And then if you go out on yourself and you put the best performance together that you can do, you will either be a leading candidate or you won't. And then you decide from that what you do next. Like, do you want to carry on or do you want to stop? And you can only do the best you can do. Like, if you go into something trying to stand out, you probably won't.
Yeah, that makes sense. I spoke a little bit about not necessarily standing out in terms of like trying to raise your head or do something specifically different, but just about setting a standard and maintaining it. And for me, not being late, turning up on time, being able to help, being willing to learn, those kind of things is, from a coach's perspective, it's just like, I think from a coach's perspective, when you see someone who's willing to learn, willing to accept, willing to like jump in and do everything, then then their potential becomes higher, because you can see that they'll be able to go much further.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's a lot of, on the women's team at Caversham, we talk about the NTRs, no talent required. You don't need any talent to be on time. To be on time, you don't need any talent to bring the right kit. Those little things that are NTRs. Do those as a starting point and build from there.
Yeah, cool,
awesome. So we got some questions on Instagram. We put out a few question boxes, so thank you for answering them. So first question we got is from Eddie Falls. What was your favorite part about coxing the PR3 Cox 4?
That's hard. My favorite part.
Winning.
No, they row so hard.
Yeah.
Like off the start line, I just didn't know what to hold on to. They're so aggressive. Like we're talking about a Cox 4.
Yeah.
And they row it like, imagine you took the power and the aggression from an 8, but you did it in a pair or a single. Like they go out with no fear. They just really get after it. They're not scared of the Cox 4 at all, and I think that's really impressive. Some people are really timid when they get in, but they really, really go after it, which I think is great. And I also just think they operate as a very tight-knit unit, and that is really beneficial for their performances. They know if one of them is just slightly off, and they can pick up what that is, and they support each other. But I just like the day-to-day, like going after simple processes, but you're putting down the 1%, But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was honestly at the starts. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
That was great.
Cool. That's really interesting. The next question we got is from Alana Burdes, and it says, what was the greatest lesson that Morgan took from her OEW selection experience?
I think with anything in sport, but I think especially with the boat race, and especially, I think, on the women's side, it's not just about beating Cambridge. We actually just didn't talk about Cambridge's Hall in that way. Like, they just didn't come up. And that wasn't because of not acknowledging them or anything like that. It was actually, they share the Oxford rowers, the Cambridge rowers, they share the most things in common that you will for anybody. So, they actually understood what we were going through the most. In terms of like the performance and the approach, so our focus was always on our optimum hull speed, and the process to bring about those turns of speed or the technique. But I think the biggest thing for me was actually it was about what the women before had done, so that the women of present could be there, and then what the women of the present were doing for the women of the future. That's I think women's sport has moved on a lot. It's still moving forward. It's still got traction. And I think that it's important to continue to do that. But also, it's not just about your message that you showed to the world through rowing in the boat race isn't just about the race. It's about inspiring people to come and get involved in the sport, to come and apply to Oxford or Cambridge. If you aren't from a private school, if you don't think you fit the mold or that background, like, come and get involved. And that was so important to me. It doesn't matter where you're from or who you are. It's about what you do and about genuinely being a good person, having shared values and a holistic approach to what you do, and bringing everyone on around you and teaching and inspiring people to have that self-efficacy. for themselves, for other people, you know, that was massive, and that was far more than the race itself. And I think that's something that continues to be there, but I think it's sometimes, you know, lost in translation.
I think that's really beautiful, is understanding where you are in such a historical event, that also what you're doing now is potentially going to inspire the people who turn on their TV and they see rowing for the first time. I remember I used to watch the boat race before I ever stepped in the boat, and I think what you said, it like holds some real weight to it.
That's a good answer, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Next question we got is from Rory McSherry, and it kind of touches upon what you spoke about earlier. It says, how do you keep a healthy mindset when keeping to the Cox's weight limits for events?
Weight is a really interesting one because I think people don't talk about it. And I think that's the first downfall. You have to talk about this. It's a part of the performance. If it is healthy for you to be at the required weight, then you'll perform the best that you can. But if it's getting to the realms of being unhealthy, then you need to be speaking to professionals, and you need to be educated and informed within the area. And I think that it's changing now. You know, certainly on a team, like all the Coxes exercise and have a healthy relationship with exercise. But previously, you know, it was difficult for me to come across other Coxes that actually exercised. And I think what's more important is that we have a healthy relationship with physical activity, with exercise, with food, with nutrition, a healthy lifestyle, and then we start considering what the weight is. You know, unless you're competing at the Olympics, then I don't think that your weight is going to be the limiting factor for your performance. I think there are much greater gains, and I think things have to be done safely and appropriately, and we have to think about, you know, the wider perspective of things. You know, there's a lot of research coming out now about like Red S, and this affects men and women, you know, and it's about like how energy deficit influences your health. In sport is going to influence your performance, and that can be through or occur in athletes that just aren't quite getting enough fuel in from all the training they're doing, and they don't even know they're under fueling, or in weight restricted sport. But the consequences or symptoms and repercussions of being in an energy deficit for a sustained period of time have long-term lasting effects. So I think it's something that has to be really carefully approached with science and actual like knowledge and understanding of the area. It's not guesswork, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't, you know, I won the boat race at 60 kilos. The weight was 50. Our coach didn't go, she had two Coxes who you have the Blue Boat and the Osiris, and the Osiris Cox was significantly lighter than I was. She never once came up to me and was like, you need to be 50 kilos or you'll cut. She was like, you need to be healthy. You need to allow your body to recover. Your weight will be what your weight will be. She gave me access to a doctor, a psychologist, a nutritionist. I had that support network, and she was like, I want you to be the best you can be on race day. If I was trying to then put my body back into an energy deficit, then I wasn't going to do my best. So she didn't bat an eyelid when it took me to 60 kilos, you know? Didn't bat an eyelid when she was like, our barrel seat's going to be lighter than our Cox. And I you know, when I went to do the weigh-in, the press weigh-in for the boat race, once that got released, I had a load of shitty messages about being above weight, about being too heavy. And I was just like, that really shows the narrow-mindedness in the sport.
Yeah.
And now I hope that it's moved forward since then. Luckily, I'm not the sort of person that, you know, is affected by that. Like, I think I knew that I was doing the best that I could do, and that's all I could do. And my plan and intention was to go and put my best foot forward and produce the best performance on race day that I could. I believe I went out and delivered that.
Definitely. I mean, I don't think weight played any role in you know, the outcome of that race and what you've done.
So definitely also shows like props to Christine for having confidence in herself, for being a coach. Like having coached, it can be difficult. You constantly questioning yourself in the same way that you do as an athlete. So like her ability to focus on performance, and keep that the main factor, like props to her, because it's so tempting to be like, oh, but we could have a 5 kilo lighter boat.
And I honestly think, had she have not been how she was, like I know that, my body wouldn't have been able to recover, and I don't think I would have been able to have gone back and done the international coxing I've done now.
And when it comes down to, in that race, being split decisions based on 100 different pieces of information that are coming into it at the same time. Yeah, if you are not, I mean, everyone knows when they're hungry, like the foggy brain and the things that come over you, like, when it comes to it, like ultimately, like her allowing you to perform in the way that was best for you was a massive part of winning that race.
Yeah. So to summarize, essentially look past the numbers that you see on the scale, focus on the leading indicators and not the lagging indicators such as weight. Focus on the process and, being healthy, exercising and prioritizing a healthy relationship. Continue to have healthy debates with other people who are, directly involved with your training. Cool. The next question is from C. Sherwin. What are some of the best and worst coxing calls you have heard?
Oh my God, I still got on my phone. I don't know. I very recently received a voice note from Anastasia Posner, was Chitty, and she had been for a run along the ISIS, and she's incredibly well spoken, and she'd sent me this audio, and she was like, "Listen, I just want to let you know that I have just heard one of the weirdest coxing calls I've ever heard in my life." And someone was shouting, like, they were just shouting pineapples. Pineapples, that was it. And the other top of their voice, just screaming pineapples.
Well, that goes back to what we talked about. It obviously meant something.
But it meant something to someone.
Yeah.
I honestly think I could cox a race with conviction and say absolutely anything within the rhythm of the hull and the right tone, and I would get a response.
Yeah.
I really do.
No, I agree. I think the worst I've ever had was we were doing a head race at Wycliffe. And to be fair, we had quite a novice cox. And I think I was maybe in 6, and Strokeman, he hasn't given us like a distance for a long time. And the Strokeman goes like, "How far?" And he like looks out the bow. "Not far." I was like, that was the last thing you
can see the finish. I mean, I'm dreadful at like being able to like judge the distance, because it doesn't matter where you are, it always kind of looks the same anyway. So unless you're bang on a marker, then you don't know, and people rely on the GPS, and you're like, well, that could be wrong. But I always think it's funny because people are like, "Oh, the cox said this, the cox said that," and I'm like, well, what about the fact that you were late every catch, or like, no one's talking about your crab, are they? No one goes, "What's the worst stroke you've ever seen?" And no one asks that question.
Yeah, but ultimately, I think that again, like, feeds into the point that the cox is more important. Ultimately, like you can have a couple of bad strokes if you steer a good line, you can make up for it.
So, what's the best coxing call you've heard?
I think it all just falls down to like what it means to the crew, or.
So, what was the most meaningful call of your Ramenham win from last year?
Oh,
Not safe for the camera.
I actually say, I can't say it. I say something on all as if the Poms are taking it back, because the Aussies want to beat the Poms, and there had been a video that was released a few days prior about it, that they couldn't wait to race the Poms. Anyway, the Poms definitely took it back, didn't they?
That's good. Like when you can do something that's specifically for the competitors. Yeah. That's a good one.
Cool. I've got one more from We Row Like This, and the question reads, bear in mind there is a correct answer to this. What do you do when you're a hippo and underwater?
I actually think they kind of like run along the bottom. I don't think they swim. I think they like run, yeah.
They literally run.
So I went to Zambia on a very fortunate and lucky experience as a result of being an old blue. And we were rowing on the Zambezi, and there were just hippos everywhere. And I just didn't really respect how dangerous they are.
Yeah.
until I was out there, and every single day I just thought I was going to die. And they're unbelievable animals. So when everyone's like, why is Leonardo a hippo? And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, they're scary and massive.
They don't even like eat humans. They just kill them and leave them there. It's just, if you get in their way,
Big old bite, yeah.
yeah, they're gonna properly go at you and not leave anything.
Yeah, I rode with a guy called James Orme, who was at Cambridge, who did the Zambia row, and he said the same thing. He was like, yeah, I've never really like had to try and focus on an outing with like the coaching launch has got 2 guys with guns in it.
Yeah.
Because if something comes for us, you know, there's crocodiles and hippos.
And these guys are like willing to put their launch in between you and these hippos in an attempt to provide some buffer window. Like they're a goner. Like the crocs on the river would bite through the launch anyway, let alone the hippo.
And they're so fast too.
Yeah, fast.
They would like you would turn around and they would dive, and you're like, oh my god, okay. And you know they're coming for you, and then they would surface, and then like a whole like chest comes out of the water, and they'd be like 100 meters away from you, like, and then you just keep going, and you're like trying to like run away from them. It's so ridiculous. I don't really know, like, I mean, it makes sense now why everywhere we went we were signing a waiver. Like I really now understand that. At the time I was like, okay, here we go, it'll be totally fine. And then I just felt like such a narp in their world. Like, what an idiot. Like,
yeah, you've come into someone else's world. Cool. I've got one last one as well that came from Donnie E, and it said, most cringeworthy thing you or someone in your crew has done.
cringeworthy.
I was thinking about this. Cringe is an odd and awkward. I was thinking for me, like, awkward is being in the stroke seat and having to have a wee in front of the cocks. It's
yeah.
awkward.
Yeah. I just get so used to that. I would just be like, do you need to go for a wee? And they were like, yeah. And I'd be like, okay. And then I just turn around.
Yeah. Okay. Like, when you're with a crew for a long time,
you know?
Point. But like the first time you had to do it, it's a bit...
Yeah. I think it's worse with girls because they will just do it. You know, I think guys are always like, you know,
mindful of that fact that they maybe
yeah.
That you should do.
Whereas, like, you know, I'm gonna name drop here, but like Susie Deer is one of the worst. You know,
coming on Friday.
You know, like she's just, yeah. Like I could do a whole podcast of like stories on Susie in the boat, but yeah, she'll just go for it. And then the problem is usually the chambers aren't like sealed, so my little feet are just paddling in their wheel all the way down the track. You know.
That's quite cringe.
Yeah, that's always a good crack.
Cringe. The other one I thought was a cringe was a funny one. I said to Peter earlier was Shrewsbury Regatta with J15. We entered the novice 8s and we came up to the start line against quite a big Nottingham Uni crew. And we went on the start line and they were making quite a lot of noise. And then one of them shouted, "All right, boys, let's show them the Big Willie style." And then, like, in the first 10 strokes, they caught, like, about 10 crabs. And within, like, 20 strokes, we had a length on them. And they got beaten by a bunch of 15-year-old boys. And I was like, oh, that's got to be one of the most cringeworthy things I've ever
that stays with you.
Oh, that's funny. That must be getting, as a uni crew, getting beaten by 15-year-olds. I mean, we loved it. We thought it was great. And they were obviously a proper novice crew. We've definitely been rowing longer, but that's a fun cringe one. Have you got any cringe?
Not so much. Probably only things that include me, but nothing comes to mind as of now.
Want to share them?
I've just got a few couple of quick fire round questions for you, Morgan, because I mean you've just been all over the world with rowing. You said you've competed in Australia, in Italy, in Austria. I know you've competed in other parts of Europe. You've competed in America. If you were to kind of tell us your 3 most favorite places to row in, you know, the ones that you're going to look back on when you're like 60 and 70 and think, man, that was fun. What would they be?
Boston in America.
Yeah,
really love it there.
Sure.
China, Shanghai. That was one hell of an experience. And then like Ross Regatta, man. You can't beat it.
We'll have to
big
go.
up. Yeah,
We'll have to go.
Big up for us.
Yeah.
I reckon I can borrow a double or a pair.
The Wye Valley. Unreal.
It's a nice place to ride.
Cool. What are some of your essentials that you need to bring to a race or into the boat when you're racing?
Contact lenses. Can't see.
That's helpful for a
You
cox.
can have those. I mean, you got the obvious ones. You like Cox box, speed coach.
Anything unique to you?
Unique to me. I used to always wear these socks with dinosaurs on, but the problem is when you go and race for GB, you have to be uniform. So if you don't all have the same socks on, you can get penalised for that.
Yeah, it works like that over in Poland as well. I haven't experienced that in the UK.
Yeah, I don't really have any like a lucky thing or anything like that.
We spoke about that again on a previous episode about if you don't have one, don't get one, because then if you lose it, it's going to throw your whole day out.
Yeah.
So it's probably best not to.
All right, and so this is going to be the last one. Your favourite pre-race snacks/meals or post-race?
I'm a big fan of the old post-weigh Boost bar.
Oh, yeah?
Oh,
Because like it doesn't really weigh anything, but it, like
Calories.
bang in some calories quick, and also like love a good Boost bar. But I love a good post-race like pizza and a pint. No, simple girl.
not pineapple and ham.
No, I actually just love a good margarita pizza, but
Keep it simple.
yeah.
Just
But
like
I am super fussy though on the like. I mean, after I've like raced and whatnot, I'm normally weight restricted, so any pizza tastes amazing. But if it's a good doughy base, I'm like, hell yeah, we're winning. For the German beer,
Yeah.
that was good.
Awesome. I think that's just about it from me. Tom, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I loved it. Like, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Like, you're such an accomplished athlete. Like, probably one of the most accomplished coxes that I've ever had the privilege of getting coxed by, but also being friends with. And like, you've done a lot for me in my career, and we've definitely had a bunch of chats that's helped me. And like, you also like got me back into coaching, which has been like a huge part of getting to this point where like I'm happy to talk about these things and share experience. And like, I really appreciate you coming on, and like, obviously all the best for the future, and we're going to stick together and we're going to keep doing some things together. But no, it's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Morgan, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I think it's such a fantastic opportunity to hear somebody who can actually bring all the different perspectives that are, you know, embedded into rowing, being an athlete, being a coach, being a cox, and also you've just been everywhere, done everything. So it was super fun to have you on, and hopefully we can do a few more of those.
Yeah, for sure. We'll do some more.
Cool. Morgan, any closing thoughts?
No, thank you very much. And like, hopefully we've given the listeners some information to, you know, make the last stroke count.
Awesome. Where can people find you online?
I'm on Instagram, at MorganBW7. That's about it, really. I've got TikTok, but I don't really do anything. I just scroll, and then I get caught in the algorithm, and I'm like, 3 hours have passed.
We've all been there.
Oh, too many times. Awesome. I think that's just about it for today. Easy there.
Cue the music.